Images flicker across the screen. Holocaust survivors, their faces etched with the trauma of the past, standing behind barbed wire. Then, a jarring cut to Gaza's ruins in 2023, a landscape of devastation mirroring a history we swore we'd never repeat. The horror is not just a distant memory relegated to history books. It's a present, palpable reality. The echoes of past atrocities reverberate in the contemporary world. A child is pulled, coughing and crying, from the rubble in Gaza, her face frozen in terror, a stark reminder of the human cost of conflict. How did a people, themselves shaped by unimaginable suffering, by the systematic dehumanization and genocide of the Holocaust, come to stand accused of inflicting similar pain, of perpetrating acts that warrant scrutiny on the world stage? This is not a simple black and white story of good versus evil, of heroes and villains, but a complex labyrinth of interwoven history, a tangled web of events and narratives, pain that spans generations, and the corrupting influence of power. Israel was born from the ashes of the Holocaust, founded on an unwavering vow: never again would such horrors be allowed to occur. But when that shield, intended for protection, is perceived by others as a sword, wielded with excessive force, the world is forced to confront agonizing questions about justice, accountability, and the very nature of survival. Today, Israel stands accused at the International Court of Justice, facing serious allegations regarding its conduct. Its actions, as portrayed by some, echoing the darkest chapters of human history, raising uncomfortable parallels. To explore these parallels is not to equate the Holocaust with the current situation, but to question, how did a narrative rooted in survival, in the pursuit of safety and security, become so tragically entangled with the subjugation of another people? This documentary seeks to amplify silenced voices, to give a platform to those whose stories have been marginalized or ignored, and to ask the unspeakable questions that haunt our collective conscience, all in the hope of forging a more just and humane future for all. To truly understand the complexities of Israel, its identity, and its place in the world, you must first walk, in your mind, through the gates of Auschwitz. Feel the chill, hear the echoes. The state of Israel was not simply a political construct. It was born from the literal ashes of the Shoah, the Holocaust. It wasn't born from abstract political theory or philosophical debates. For centuries, the Jewish people existed as a vulnerable diaspora, scattered across the globe, constantly facing the threats of pogroms, forced expulsions from their homes, and the relentless, insidious poison of anti-Semitism that permeated societies. The Holocaust was not an isolated incident, but the horrifying culmination of this centuries-long persecution, a systematic genocide that resulted in 6 million innocent Jewish men, women, and children being brutally murdered. The survivors were left with unimaginable trauma, but also with an unshakable resolve: never again. In the aftermath, Zionism, the movement for Jewish self-determination, became an urgent and undeniable necessity. A secure homeland was seen as the only true guarantee against future annihilation, the only place where Jews could truly control their destiny. The survivors, carrying the weight of history, arrived in Palestine as refugees, seeking safety and a new beginning. They came not as conquerors, seeking to displace others, but as builders determined to construct a fortress of hope, a place where Jews could finally live without fear, where their children could grow up safe from persecution. Israel's founding in 1948 was viewed by many as an act of historical justice, a miracle of resurrection after unimaginable loss and suffering. The establishment of sovereignty was not just a political act, but an act of defiance against erasure, a declaration that the Jewish people would not be victims again. Every conflict, every threat, is therefore seen through the prism of survival. Every challenge is perceived as potentially existential, a matter of life and death. The army is not just a military force, but the guarantor of the nation's very existence, shaped by the collective trauma of the past and a deep-seated belief that safety and security can only be achieved through unwavering strength and vigilance. This deeply ingrained mindset, forged in the crucible of fear and persecution, would profoundly shape Israel's future trajectory, influencing its policies and its relationships with the world, in ways that its founders, in their initial idealism, could never have fully imagined. The promise of a sanctuary, a safe haven, became a double-edged sword, defining its identity and its destiny in complex and often contradictory ways. The tragic irony: Israel, envisioned as a sanctuary, a refuge for the oppressed, a safe haven built on the ashes of unimaginable suffering, a place where Jewish people could finally determine their own destiny, free from persecution. Now, that very nation stands accused of oppression, a painful reversal of fortune that echoes through the corridors of history. The weight of these accusations is heavy, casting a long shadow over the ideals upon which Israel was founded. The nation built by refugees, those who knew the sting of statelessness and displacement, now presides over a stateless Palestinian population, a situation that seems to defy the very principles upon which the state was established. Generations of Palestinians continue to live in refugee camps, their dreams of a homeland deferred indefinitely. The shield meant for protection, a symbol of security and resilience in a hostile region, is now seen by many as a weapon of domination, an instrument of control that perpetuates the cycle of conflict and resentment. The very thing designed to safeguard a nation is now perceived as a tool of subjugation. After the 1967 war, a pivotal moment in the region's history, Israel became an occupying power, ruling over millions of Palestinians, their lives and futures now subject to Israeli control. The occupation, initially thought to be temporary, a means to an end, became permanent. Checkpoints, settlements, and separate laws. Maintaining this system, this intricate web of control, requires dehumanization. Security language, the rhetoric of self-preservation, justifies oppression. The mechanisms of never again for Jews, the solemn vow to prevent future atrocities, now inflict daily suffering on Palestinians, creating a painful and unsettling parallel. Images from Gaza, flattened neighborhoods, starving children, challenge Israel's image as a beacon of democracy, raising difficult questions about the compatibility of occupation and democratic values. The founders' dream of a just society, a nation that would be a light unto the nations, is overshadowed by accusations of apartheid and genocide, allegations that strike at the very heart of Israel's identity. The shield has become a cage, trapping both Palestinians and, perhaps more tragically, the soul of Israel. The paradox is inescapable and heartbreaking, a stark reminder of the complexities and contradictions that define this enduring conflict. The harshest critiques come from within, Israeli soldiers themselves. Breaking the silence founded by veterans shares testimonies of the occupation's daily brutality. Soldiers describe harassment, home demolitions, and raids meant to intimidate, not protect. Orders to make our presence felt translate into acts of control, not defense. Some soldiers, haunted by their actions, draw forbidden comparisons to the stories of their own grandparents' suffering. The occupation, they realize, is a spiritual crisis, corrupting those tasked with upholding it. They entered the army to defend, but left feeling like jailers. Their testimonies reveal a generation grappling with the contradiction between Jewish ethics and military reality. The occupation destroys not only Palestinian lives but also Israel's moral fabric. The whispers from the barracks are a warning. The cost is the nation's soul. Soldiers who speak out face swift backlash, branded as traitors, ostracized and harassed. Breaking the silence is condemned by politicians, targeted by laws, and banned from schools. The act of bearing witness is framed as betrayal, not courage. Society attacks the messenger, refusing to confront the disturbing truths. For a nation built on moral purity, admitting its own soldiers are oppressors is unbearable. Truth-tellers lose friends, face protests, and are accused of fueling anti-Semitism. The message dissent is treason, conformity is patriotism. Suppressing criticism signals a democracy in crisis, closing in on itself, radicalizing. The campaign isn't just about silencing veterans, it's about enforcing a single narrative. The price of truth is exile, but the cost of silence may be far greater. Since October 7, 2023, Gaza's conflict has reached new devastation. After Hamas's attack, Israel's military campaign drew global accusations of war crimes, entire neighborhoods erased, indiscriminate airstrikes documented by Amnesty and Human Rights Watch. Reports allege use of white phosphorus in civilian areas, prohibited under international law. Israel imposed a total siege, cutting off food, water, and electricity to over 2 million people. UN officials warn of man-made famine and collective punishment. The cumulative effect, bombing, controversial weapons, siege, forms the basis of international legal cases. Organizations report a collapsed healthcare system, traumatized and starving civilians. For much of the world, these are not acts of self-defense, but evidence of war crimes. The humanitarian catastrophe is undeniable. The world is no longer silent. Global protests demand a ceasefire and accountability. From New York to Johannesburg, millions march, challenging Israel's narrative of perpetual victimhood. The Israeli flag, once a symbol of resilience, now appears alongside accusations of apartheid and genocide. Within the Jewish diaspora, consensus shatters. Young Jews lead protests, invoking justice and compassion. The schism is public and painful, dividing families and communities. International bodies take unprecedented steps: ICC arrest warrants, ICJ genocide charges. Israel's shield of impunity is cracking. The digital age amplifies the reckoning. Palestinian journalists document the war in real time. Raw footage bypasses traditional media, shaping younger generations' views. The world is a witness as never before, forced into an uncomfortable, necessary conversation. Old justifications no longer hold. In the face of suffering, silence is complicity. To ignore Gaza's devastation is to choose ignorance over empathy. Martin Niemöller's warning echoes, "When we do not speak, we enable oppression." Holocaust comparisons are fraught, but some survivors insist, never again must mean never again for anyone. The lesson is universal human rights, not exclusive victimhood. True compassion sides with humanity, not tribalism. We must hold space for Israeli trauma and Palestinian suffering. One does not justify the other. The path forward demands courage to break silence and ask painful questions. Reject easy narratives. Embrace complexity. The world's promise of never again is being tested in Gaza. We cannot afford to fail. The cost of silence is measured in lives, a price humanity must refuse to pay.